Being the golden child in the narcissistic family is not necessarily something that always stays consistent throughout time. And so I want to talk a little bit about what happens when you go from being a golden child to a scapegoat. Another thing that I want to cover today is what happens when different parents are appointing golden children and how this represents a power struggle within the family that had nothing to do with you. So basically, when I was growing up, I had some other siblings. One of my siblings, she was the scapegoat for pretty much the entirety of her elementary school years, and then at some point in middle school became the golden child appointed by my mother. She kind of maintained that, and with my dad, he kind of like cast her aside. He didn't really see her as somebody who was going to like fulfill his needs. And my dad, his main thing was it was like intelligence was the important thing. You couldn't be too much smarter than him, but he was a doctor, and that's what he kind of took pride in, was like book smarts essentially. And I had another sibling who was pretty smart, and throughout elementary school was my dad's main golden child. And then at some point around middle school, kind of fell out of favor and became a scapegoat. And then there was me. It's harder to tell when you were a golden child, when you were a scapegoat, when it's you and it's not like you looking at someone else necessarily. But essentially, towards the end of high school, if not, I don't know, maybe more of high school, but I know towards the end of high school, like 11th grade for sure, 12th grade, I was the golden child for my dad. And what happened was I got sent to college. He put me on the track. You had to do math or science. He told me I wouldn't be able to make money any other way. And like I said, he was a doctor, so he went down the STEM field. It was not what I was good at, or it wasn't what I was passionate about. I was always much more into like human behavior and, creative endeavors, but they put me into that path. So I did what I was told, and my parents were really pushing that I go to a UC school because that's the ones that have the most prestige, and my dad had gone to UCLA. Well, anyways, I did go to college, and I went to a UC. I didn't go to one of the top UCs. I went to one of the ones that was easier to get into. And during this time, a power struggle kind of initiated with my parents. I think once my mom saw that I was away from the house, it was really not meeting her needs. She likes to have people around all the time. She was a housewife, and here I was going off on my own. At some point, I was very dependent then, so that's why I struggled a lot in college that first year. I think a lot of first years do. But she set up a plan and brought me right back, and I ended up having to go to community college from the house. So here's like what actually was happening and how it benefited her. Whenever my mom took one of my dad's golden children, which happened with my sibling, like I mentioned before, and then that was like the practice so she could do it to me. It takes away the spotlight from any of the children, and it puts it all on her, so she gets all the attention and all the resources. So that was one reason why she did it. When my dad no longer had any golden children, it kept him more in line with her in terms of what direction things were going in. She got to tell the narrative of the house and have him fully back it up rather than argue against any of it. And she also was able to be the sole person who was assigning the roles in the house, essentially putting her above him at all times. And this is something when you have two narcissists as parents, they are competing for power. They are benefiting off of certain things with each other. It's not a loving relationship in the sense that they're there because they care about each other. They're there because they're getting something out of it. And my dad was getting something out of it too, but my mom was essentially kind of like, if you want this and you want to get the benefits that I have to offer you, I've got to be top dog and everybody else is beneath. And so her golden child, the one that she had appointed, was the one that she supported and ended up going to grad school eventually. And then me and the other one, we left as soon as we were done with college. I always thought my parents had a relationship that was pretty close and pretty good for people like them. But I think that putting one of us in the middle of conflict was one of the ways that they buffered it from each other. And I think that there was sometimes there's like these fractures in the relationship that you're not seeing between the parents, and having the conflict was a way for them to unify against a common enemy. And my mom was very useful for my dad in terms of like knowing how to penalize people, knowing how to maintain control, knowing how to keep the family image the way that it needed to look. Essentially, as soon as the golden child became a scapegoat, my dad kind of passed you off to the mom and
was like, here, take this sacrifice and leave me alone.
And he has nothing to do with you anymore, except for like putting you down and criticizing you and stuff. My dad, once we were scapegoated, would kind of egg my mom on whenever he wanted to get somebody punished, or would just kind of spy on your behavior and things like that, and she would kind of take over. So my point in all of it is to say that when you go from being a golden child to a scapegoat, it really has nothing to do with you, especially if there's that power struggle between the parents. She was identifying that me and my sibling at one point, we were both going down the paths of being his golden children, and if we did, that kind of was a loss for her, because she's not being able to see herself reflected in us. She's seeing him reflected in us. And those types of moms can also have like serious jealousy between themselves and their daughters. They feel in competition. They can be in competition for resources, inheritance, beauty, attention, maybe what you get out of the relationship in the first place. And those were all reasons to kind of do that. So she focused on one kid to be more of a reflection of herself, and made me and my other sibling start having to conform to more of her needs. And one of my siblings became more of her caretaker, kind of like a personal assistant. She kind of had her doing all this housework, which kind of reflected her. And then with me, she had me kind of, she just kind of like yelled at me all the time and used me like as a buffer for her anger and stuff and those types of emotional needs that she had. So point is, I've spent a lot of time in my life sometimes wondering like, why did I get scapegoated? What was wrong with me? What could I have done better? And it really had nothing to do with that. It all had to do with a power struggle. When I was little, the sibling of mine that became the golden child later for my mom and maintained it, she was getting physically abused a lot because she had trouble learning. She actually would have trouble paying attention, things like that. It improved when she got older, but that was what she had trouble with. So of course I learned survival in this house. The biggest thing that was important was your academics and showing up perfect and good behavior report from school. So of course I focused on that. And it was valued for a certain period of time, and then at another period of time it became devalued by her and was a reason to attack and take me down. And my other sibling, who was really smart too, she was so smart that she didn't need anyone to necessarily motivate her. She was already pretty motivated. We all were, honestly. Everyone in the house was smart. It was just like me and the youngest one were kind of the ones that were put on that pedestal for a while. The last thing that I forgot to mention is once she has knocked over all of the kids from that status and there's no longer a golden child for my dad, now for him to have anyone on a pedestal, it would just be her. Just her as the mom. And she becomes kind of like, she's not a golden child because she's not expected to reflect him exactly, because she's an adult, she has her own role, but she gets to be the person that he holds on the pedestal, the person that he goes to if he has any problems with us, and the person that he can like share his frustration with. So just keep in mind with narcissistic relationships, it's always there's always a function to what's happening, and there's usually things going on in the hierarchy that you're not aware of. And there's different ways that my mom really benefited from knocking out scapegoats or knocking out golden children and creating more scapegoats, where she was able to get trips out of it. She was able to get money saved out of it, different things. When it comes to narcissists, they have a very, very hard time with accountability. So there were different situations where instead of blaming my mom for something, my dad would blame one of us for something. So for instance, like she said that we needed to go on this pilgrimage because of something one of my siblings had done. Really, she just wants to go on the pilgrimage, and she's using one of the kids as leverage. That's how scapegoating helped her a bit. And he was on the plane there and literally looked at my sibling and was like, the whole reason why we have to do this trip is because of you. Instead of taking out his frustration on my mom because he doesn't want to go on this trip, or communicate healthily with my mom that he doesn't want to go on this trip, he took it out on the child. Of course, with that trip, my mom can't go without a man like her brother or her husband to do it. Or like another example, when I was in college, I did not ever come up to them first and go, I think I need to drop out of school. That wasn't me. Like, I would just obey whatever they told me. So my parents, both of them were pushing for me to get out of the school. My mom was pushing my dad and being like, she needs to leave. She doesn't like it there. That's what's causing all her stress. That's why she's having all these stress symptoms. She needs to come back home. And then my dad was coming up to me and he said, we could waste more money on that school, or you could just leave now, or we could pay more money. And so then when I finally did it, I followed orders. I followed what they told me to do. Then they stepped back and they were like, oh my God, I can't believe she did that. And he took out whatever frustration he had about it on me directly. Oh, you listen too much to what other people are telling you. And instead of where it actually belonged, which was within his conflict with his wife, who didn't want me there, and within him, because he was also the person who said, get out of there. And also, it's effectively a way for him to take away accountability from himself. As children, we have no ability to tell our parents what to do. I couldn't go talk to my mom, or my sibling couldn't go talk to my mom and be like, I don't want to go on this trip, we're not going. That's something him as an adult can do, have that conversation or figure out a way for her to do it where he doesn't have to go. You know what I mean? So it's not, it was like he would deflect and throw on my mom, but then he also liked to throw and deflect it on us as well. And if he sat there and he was too critical of my mom's is more powerful than a child. And so especially when you have these narcissists that are kind of essentially cowards, they'll take it out on the person that really has no power in the situation. Hope that helps. And if you are on your journey of healing, just keep in mind that these are people and everything kind of had a function in that house, and you don't need to fit that role anymore, and it has nothing to do with your own strengths or your unique gifts.